Welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat for the week of November 17th, 2016. I am your host, Jose Otero, and this is IGN's Nintendo Show. Joining me this week is Jared Petty.
Glad to be here.
And Chris Kohler.
Yay!
Now, this is an awesome sort of come full circle moment. Yeah,
yes.
Because Chris, on this very show, announced that Power Up, a book that he wrote, well, it started as a college thesis, then grew into a larger book, was published what year initially?
2004 originally.
Yeah, and now it's back in print from Dover Publications. There's a foreword in it by Shuhei Yoshida. There's a new chapter in the book as well at the end talking about Iwata dreams of video games. And we're going to spend some time talking about coming full circle as not just this moment, but even for you, like coming back to this book to write it. This was an important thing for folks like me who were coming up trying to figure out how to be more informed or how to approach writing about games and not just saying the graphics look this way, it sounds like that. Like, we wanted to have more mature criticisms to say. And I would say this is one of those books that were part of sort of getting to that place, at least for me. I'm Jared, I don't know.
No, I think this is one of the great early primary source materials. I mean, the fact is that there hadn't been a lot of real academic research on the history of video games up until the time you wrote this. There were some other significant pieces out there, but this is really one of the very few really kind of rich, deep works from that period upon which video game scholarship has kind of been built since. So the fact that it's back in print is exciting. The last time I bought this book, it was used on eBay for like $35.
Yeah,
so
I know.
The fact that I can get it now. But even now, even though a lot of what's in this book has become almost common knowledge for shows like this, but this is sort of the legacy on which podcast discussions were built. This and things like Masters of Doom and a few other books from around the same period. This is one of the really good ones, and to this day remains relevant and important.
Well, thank you so much for saying so. Yeah. So also I wanted to note that the last time I was on Nintendo Voice Chat, we actually this is the show on which I announced this book, the remake, the remaster, as you were, of Power Up, and so now it's finally here, and you guys have had your copies, and it's just very exciting for me to actually have it available again. But it is so funny. It's so weird that this is now the point in my career where I am getting people telling me like, oh, yeah, I read this book and it inspired me to go into video game journalism, or I read this book and it inspired me to go. I ran into the head. I met the head of VR at Epic, like their technical head of virtual reality, and he was like, oh yeah, I went to Japan during college and I read Power Up on the way there, and it was like, that's it. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to get into video games. And he wrote his thesis about Japanese games, and now he's running VR.
Yeah, IGN keeps a video game reading list that we re-promote every now and then, and this has been on it for a long time. I'm really excited that people can finally buy it, not just hear about it.
That's the best part. So you can go and finally you can get it in ebook form if you want it in ebook form. So it's great. Yeah. And it's nice. It was very scary for me. I mean, I came on the show and talked about how we were going to republish it, and super excited, but at the same time I was kind of scared because it's like this is something I wrote a long time ago. Like I was between the ages of 21 and 24 when I wrote it, and I know that guy, and he was a real jerk. So like are people going to like this book or not? And it generally the reaction has been really positive. It's been really great. So I'm glad to have it out there again. Yeah. To be consumed in the format that people want to consume it in, not have to get it for $35. I'm so sorry that you had to pay that much for it.
I bought it also secondhand as well, like off of I believe it was Amazon. But in coming back to the original premise for this book was, Chris, you've said on the show and you've said in other places, this was your graduate thesis essentially at Tufts University, where you were studying Japanese and Japanese culture. Side note for folks listening to the show, if you want to hear more about that experience and someone who helped inspire this book come together, Jared has a podcast called Pockets Full of Soup, where Chris appeared as a guest to talk in deeper detail about that.
We went deep into college. Yeah.
Well, it's very kind of you to bring that up.
No worries. But your thesis was about the cinematic Japanese video game.
Yeah.
And
the idea was, it was like asking this question of, okay, well, Japanese movies didn't really become popular outside of Japan. Japanese anime, at that point, had not really become so popular. Now, of course, it's very popular and inspires. I think if you look at a lot of American animation right now, it's inspired from kids who grew up watching Sailor Moon and then became
the anime boom. Totally.
But Japanese video games became so popular worldwide, and it was like, why when other Japanese cultural exports didn't. And I really wanted to lay that out. And so Power Up it's kind of a weird pastiche. It's kind of all over the place, talking about all the Japanese video game industry from many different angles. But I just wanted to explore that question of, well, why did this happen this way? And talking about, importantly, Shigeru Miyamoto, what was so, and what was also, can we look back at Japanese visual culture, Japanese manga, the sort of millennia old traditions that the Japanese have with manga, anime, woodblock prints, all that kind of stuff. And does that have some relevance towards video games? And I think that it does. And I think that, then I sort of wrote the new chapter for this edition also to kind of maybe continue that on a little bit. And as you said, it's called Iwata Dreams of Video Games, and it's sort of a summation of the life and career of Satoru Iwata, the late president of Nintendo, and what did he bring to the table? How did he change things? So, and of course that was something I really wanted to write, and so it all kind of worked out very well that I was able to do that as the final chapter for this. And of course, what I didn't realize was I really like the ending of this book, the original ending. And then I realized by writing an extra chapter, I had to write another ending. Because the ending's no longer the ending. And so I had to do that as well. But I looked back on old interviews that I had done, or slightly recent interviews that I'd done with Iwata and with Miyamoto, and I realized that we had things from those interviews that did not fit into the story, but that looking back now, those things that were cut out of the story that I was writing at the time were actually quite relevant to this chapter, and so those are in there too. So there's some stuff Iwata talking about Miyamoto and Miyamoto talking about Iwata that have not been read before. So you got to read it
or even Nintendo's success. Like the original ending was talking about, if I remember correctly, just that the stage was set for Nintendo to kind of open the floodgates to basically chase every gamer. This whole like blue ocean strategy. I think it was starting to sort of form in those final chapters. And then you arrive to the point of telling that story. I want to rewind a little bit though and talk about as well, like even like pointing, going frame by frame through Donkey Kong cinematics and how it sets up a story. Or one of my favorite things that maybe didn't occur to me at the time, but Final Fantasy's opening, and how like you had this quest that you had to do first, and then once you complete it, you get a title card and you get sort of that setup. And I like that was something that caught me right away, because I don't think I caught it when I played it, like for whatever reason, either just age or not really looking at it that way.
No, that's one of my favorite things you talk about, because as a kid when I first played it, it did hit me so hard. Like first I turn my game on, there's a blue screen, and then text begins to appear to tell me a story. I hop in, I travel around, I level up, I save the princess. I've played RPGs before. Oh, that was really cool. A little shorter than I thought. Wait, they built a bridge, and then the game starts.
Jared's older than me, by the way. No, I'm kidding.
So, and I stood on the bridge, but that music started to play. You don't know what's going to happen, and that dun 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 dun. This is very cheesy. I got, as I remember as a kid, getting emotional, getting a little teary, and so please, I interrupted in the middle of Jose's question. That is a moment that spoke to me. What about?
I got really emotional about an hour later when I had to buy 99 potions to get into the marsh cave.
There was that too.
That's a different kind of emotion.
The original Final Fantasy has its ups and its downs.
No, totally.
If you got from the first castle to the marsh cave in an hour, I'm impressed.
All right, there you go.
An hour, 2 hours.
Now we're talking
5 hours.
But talk a little bit about that. Like, so that sort of spoke to you, and that was sort of part of how you proved this thesis.
Yeah, way above and beyond other console games. I mean, when you looked at Japanese game developers in general, but really Final Fantasy was this sort of standard bearer of creating video games that felt like movies, but in a very video gamey kind of way. And so I really wanted to break that down and to talk about that, and what did they actually do? Like, why does it feel so good? Why is it so weird that a video game would do this sort of thing? What is the emotional impact of delaying the title screen on a game? Why is that so interesting? Because of course games start with the title screen. Everybody knows that, right? But by doing it that way, it makes you feel like it's more than a video game. And it was starting with the answers. Well, obviously Super Mario Brothers and Final Fantasy are, these amazing video games. But then taking a step back and thinking, well, why? What do they do with it? And then of course, there's been so much wonderful research going into these games that I didn't cover in 2004. But it is nice to think that, maybe this set somebody on the path. I wish I had talked about, you've probably talked about like that opening screen of Super Mario Brothers and how it functions as a tutorial.
Yeah.
Well, in 2004, Miyamoto had never talked about that before, and it wasn't something that I innately realized. But of course it would have been perfect to have in a book like this, right? But it just didn't really occur to me.
That makes total sense. Jared, you were going to say?
No, just a question. You've talked. I've heard you talk before about Donkey Kong being an early example of video game storytelling.
Yeah.
And you talked about this topic about the cinematic era. When it comes to Japanese video gaming right now, what's impressing you in innovations in storytelling in the last 3-4 years in this period of time? Like what's striking you now?
I don't know if. Really, I think it's the people who grew up playing. If you look at a game like Gone Home, in which there is an explicit sort of like mention made of the Super Nintendo, in the game Gone Home, I think you have people who grew up on Japanese games, writers and artists from all over the world who took Final Fantasy and now are creating these interesting narrative experiences that actually build on that. Yep. The Japanese games industry, as you know, right now is maybe struggling a little bit to kind of get its groove back. And I think the experimental narrative stuff is things like Gone Home that we're seeing kind of happening over here. But if you talk, I think, to the creators of these really interesting experiences that are playing with narrative, you're going to go back and you're going to find that these are younger people who grew up on Japanese video games and are inspired by that.
Got it. So in moving forward then to tell that chapter about, Iwata Dreams of Video Games and reading it and just rereading it this morning, you can definitely tell it was also emotional for you, I feel. Like just to, as someone who you got to talk to. When I got here, by the time I got into IGN to do this job, Iwata was not coming to the U.S. for E3. Yeah. And so talk a little bit about that, about writing that. Because you not only through there I saw that, but also you were involved in a GDC short film that was also very much talking about Iwata.
So
and
that actually
his
was David Hellman, who was the friend of mine, but he did the art for the game Braid, and he did the comic Second Quest.
Yeah, he was on the show.
He was on the show. There we go.
Yeah.
So he, as soon as he kind of got that assignment, he was just like, hey, off the record, I'm doing this. And I said, oh, great. Well, I've already written this whole chapter about Iwata for this book. So, why don't you read the chapter before anybody else? He was like the second person to read the chapter besides my editor. Yeah. And I said, and then let's just talk about it. And so during the whole process, we bounced. It was funny because it went from, hey, I'm doing this, to we talked about it so much that and there are some of my ideas in there, as far as a couple little things. I like to say I did about 0.05% of that thing because it was all them. But I said, oh, you should read this chapter. Then we kept bouncing ideas. Then it became, oh, can we put special thanks to you in that? I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you so much. That'd be so nice. And then by the end of it was like, okay, I think we're just going to put story consultant because I kind of like glommed onto it so much.
Totally.
But yeah, it is personal. It is very frustrating because it is wonderful that I did get the chance to interview Mr. Iwata a couple of times, right? Mm-hmm. The interview that we ended up doing was by and large kind of it was for the Wii U launch, and it was really just talking about a lot of like industry problems and things like that. But it's like, geez, like, wouldn't it have been nice to sit down and pick this guy's brain about his history of video game design, And it is a very tragic loss for video game because he would have done so much more. Yeah. He was 55, like he had another, he had decades in front of him to continue to produce new and exciting things. Yeah. But he, he knew who I was. You know what I mean? He was always just, very, very nice and pleasant whenever we would meet and talk about things. And I mean, he was total
I always
Nintendo
heard
nerd.
He listened very intently. Like he gave you every bit of his attention. You saw in interviews. Someone said that to me once.
Yes, I would definitely say that, and I think I've heard that from a lot of other people too. That he reaches out to people and he listens to people, and it doesn't necessarily mean that he does what you say, but he really listened to others' ideas. And sometimes people would, be able to get one over on him that way. You know what I mean? Like they'd actually, that he'd be like, you know what, you're right. We're going to go with your idea. Yeah. And that's, it's a shame. It's a shame to lose somebody like that as as the leader of a business, because he was really, that we're very firmly in, the post Iwata Nintendo right now, and I don't really know what that's going to be like.
Yeah, and it still feels though like it is very much moving along to his script, to the things that he set in place. And maybe we'll hear more. Maybe that's an assumption. It is a safe assumption to say that Switch was very far along within his time there,
because if you're looking at all the statements that he made about the NX, he was really laying out, what the Switch was going to be. I think a lot of people misinterpreted a lot of those statements. Sure. But if you read them now, understanding what the Switch is, you see what he's talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I hope it works out.
Definitely. Yeah. Nintendo is heading into a bold new future. So you can find Power Up at your local bookstore if you have a local bookstore. But where else can you find Power Up?
The best thing to do is just go on Amazon. Just get it there. It's heavily discounted. It's like $10. It's the retail price is $14.95.
Yeah, ebook there as well.
Ebook, it's on Kindle. I think it's on Nook. I believe it's on iBooks. If you want to go that route,
Cool,
so you should be all set.
Yeah, and the setup then comes up to what Nintendo is doing in business these days, which I actually, when I was giving you the rundown for what we're going to talk about on the show, I forgot to mention this. Let's talk a little bit about Super Mario Run.
Oh yeah,
because we got some info this week. So Nintendo revealed Super Mario Run's date and price. So December 15th, 2016, $9.99 iOS. Android, you're waiting till 2017. It's still unsure how long you're waiting. And they ironed out a little more in terms of there's 24 stages in the game across 6 worlds. They showed Kingdom Mode, which is Hideki Kono's contribution to that game, at least according to Miyamoto. Just sort of this investment mode where you're spending coins and building your own Mushroom Kingdom. And then there's a PvP mode, which they've talked about before, called Toad Rally. According to Apple, I want to say a month ago, 2 million people signed up for notifications before yesterday's announcement.
Okay.
But here we are. The price is out there, $9.99. So the big looming question for a lot of folks is, is this going to do well in the very crowded, very competitive iOS market?
I hope so. I hope so, because I'm glad that Nintendo is kind of taking something of a stand and saying this sort of rush to the bottom. That there should be a premium pricing market, and $10 is not a premium price for a video game, right?
Yeah.
But it certainly is for an iOS game, and you got to hope that it would be successful at that price, because it's going to change the types of video games that we can get. I don't necessarily just want to have games that are just free to play games.
Yeah.
I don't want a game that's trying to sell me things. I feel like picketing the streets at this point, just wandering around and begging every human being on the planet, please buy this, because if this doesn't do well, they are going to be more tempted to go toward the markets that they're already being pressured toward, and that includes a game where you have to adapt your mechanics to sell you more. And I'm not happy with a future where the kind of games Nintendo makes have that as a significant part of their design structure. Nintendo has, up to this point through their history, they love making money hand over fist, but they do it selling great games. I don't want to see the design compromised, so please buy this.
But notice that they are doing it through an in-app purchase, right? You don't pay $10 and then download. You download and then you play a little bit, and then it says, hey, do you want to unlock the whole thing for $10? Which I think is what we're going to see a lot of.
I'm okay with that as long as there's a hard cap, as long as I can see what it is. I think Sean Beebe wrote a thing not too long ago about I think it was Calculords, and about discovering how putting a cap on how much you could sell in a mobile game on microtransactions could be financially devastating because of the business model that so many of these are built on, which is mostly about, frankly, exploiting addiction. If they're going to have to sell this game at scale to make their money, so it's going to need to be a huge hit for them to be able to justify to their investors that this was the right call. That's why and
Nintendo's been very deliberate through this entire road up to smartphones. I feel like first they've always said we're not porting something you've seen 100 times. We're not putting the original Super Mario Brothers on phones. We're not porting games that already exist and just slapping them on here. And also, we think that these are very much, this is a platform for original stuff. That's the market. That's what the market wants and will thrive there. But they've also stood their ground across the industry on the value of a game. And that, you can't race to the bottom like the iOS market did shortly after it launched and the App Store launched. But at the same time...
But what is that, again, maybe this is beyond the scope of the discussion, but what does it say that was possible? The fact that was, look at the fact that when the App Store launched, it was major game makers selling games for $10, right? It was like Sega with Super Monkey Ball for $10, right? That's largely what it was. But then people like to talk about, prices race to the bottom. No, what that means is that the oligopoly, of video game makers, the 10 companies in the world that were allowed to make video games got smashed. And it got smashed because any kid in their garage could make a game and sell it for $1 and then make money on that.
That's right.
And it's these companies had to learn. It was never about $1 being the optimum price for a video game. It was never about that.
For sure.
It was about dealing with reality instead of going, la, 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 I can't hear you, reality doesn't exist.
Sure.
And saying, you should pay me $10 for a game. It's no, if you want to charge $10 for a game, you need to learn to play in this world where somebody can undercut you and your game needs to be worth it.
Well, I'm glad you said it because that is what
charge $10 for crap anymore.
Yeah, that's what led to that race to the bottom. It was that there were undercut games essentially coming out, or even there's clones. That's a whole other separate issue on the App Store where someone takes a game that you're charging $4 or $5 for, $10 for, and they make another one just like it, but they don't call it the same thing.
Right, and you can copyright imagery. This is decided case law. Capcom versus Data East. Data East versus Capcom. Fighter's History, because Capcom said Fighter's History copies the look and feel of Street Fighter 2, but it didn't take any of the music, it didn't take any of the songs, and the court ruled that the graphics. You cannot nail somebody on making a game that plays like your game. That is not copyrightable.
Didn't Data East actually pull Karate Champ out in the middle of all of that to justify some of it?
I think so, but I don't think they needed to. They didn't need to prove that they owned the prior art. Because, of course, then Konami could run in with the Money in the Bank briefcase and talk about Yi Ar Kung Fu if they wanted to. But
it is exciting, though.
And the thing that's going to definitely help Nintendo is that they are the featured spot on the App Store. There are folks signing up to be notified. They're getting the most promotion I've seen on an App Store, on a big App Store game like this.
Yeah.
2 waves when it was announced, and then once again now, if you open the App Store, it's the first thing you see. Launching December 15th sets up that window where once the iOS store is locked and there's that 2-week period where they don't update it.
It's
just going to be sitting there for folks to buy when they open up new devices.
It's great for everybody. You know what I mean? It's great. This deal is great. This is... You've been talking about when is Nintendo going to go third party, right? When Nintendo said, we're going to put out Miitomo for smart devices, and then it just sort of, without any promotion from anybody other than Nintendo, just sort of appeared on iOS and it appeared on Android and other smart devices. It was okay, this was Miyamoto coming out on stage at the Apple press conference, shaking hands with Tim Cook. That was the moment. That was the Nintendo goes third party moment. And people dreamed of this happening 10 years ago with Miyamoto showing up on the Xbox press conference or something like that, right? But no, it happened at the Apple one. But this is a big deal for these two companies to be buddy now. What does that mean?
And Apple has sold it is quick to point out they've sold 1 billion iPhones. Not all of them will play Super Mario Run, but there is a significant base that Nintendo can sell to.
There is.
And you've been the guy sort of shouting at on the microphone saying, who knows what can come from this, and that's not 100%
it's catastrophic
to say.
change. It's a huge deal. I mean, it's like there is everything before this, and there is everything after this, as far as like the Nintendo, the history of Nintendo.
Well, and Nintendo may find themselves in a kind of a win-win situation here. It sells really, really well. Then they hope, in addition to making lots and lots of money and opening up new markets and saying, oh, well, we can do more of these designed specifically for this platform. They're also hoping, I suspect, that this will drive traffic toward their first-party platforms as well. And Mario's effectively kind of I think it may have been John Davison talking about being a Trojan horse.
Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go, the story in July was Go was huge. Everyone knew that. But also, hey, look at X and Y and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire all sold better. 2DS, 3DS sold better. Coincidentally, there is a Mario Maker game coming out in December. I don't know if you guys remember for 3DS. There's also several other Mario games out on the market that have that stamped on them as well.
And there's a Mario game that we saw on the Switch commercial before anything else. Whatever it is, that's what they chose to show us first.
I mean, awareness drives demand, right? The more people who are aware of something, the more people who want that thing, and there's going to be that knock-on effect where, of course, Pokemon Go is played by a billion people. I don't know. Of course, Pokemon Sun and Moon sales are going to go up. But this is not, the problem here is this is not an endlessly repeatable strategy for Nintendo. It's like, sure, you can sell like 10% more games on your home platform if you have a huge hit mobile game. It's like, well, getting that huge hit mobile game is the hard part, right?
True.
It's nice to have those knock-on effects afterwards, but that cannot be a strategy.
Sure, but it does tie into something that Iwata says in your book, actually, where there is he compares the phones to the phones of today to the TV screens, the commercials you used to see back in the day.
That's absolutely right.
And Mario Run, to an extent, is a commercial for the bigger Mario games that you can get, and that doesn't mean that they didn't put any effort into it. That doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means to say this is a taste of the quality software we can deliver. You want more? Come check out our devices, and hopefully the story for Switch is that's a damn good device.
And if it doesn't work, it's still, I think this is kind of a win-win situation for them. If it works, then they sell more Switches, they sell more software on Switch, and they sell a phone game. If it doesn't work, this acts as a mental bulwark to their investors to say, guys, if the Switch thing doesn't pan out, look how many games we sold on phones. We're going to be okay. We'll just do that more. This is kind of a great spot for them to be in.
It's diversification of the business. You're going to see them doing games on Switch and doing games on mobile, and that, I mean, it's no different than what Nintendo used to do, which is to support the home platform and the portable platform, which this era is coming to an end very soon. But the home platform and the portable used to be totally incompatible, and they had to do games for both. And now it's the benefit now is that they're only trying to get third parties attracted to one platform, whereas they can still make games for this other platform, but they have that business diversification as well.
Sure. No, definitely. And as going with Iwata's quotes shortly before he passed, talking a lot about Nintendo as an entertainment brand, Nintendo branching out, and you got the Universal deal right after that. You got, this week there was that scrap deal.
Zelda Real Escape.
Yeah, exactly.
Defenders of the Triforce.
Did you get tickets yet?
Oh, yes, I did.
Oh, I haven't. I need to. When are you going?
They're sold out. They're sold out.
Already, it's gone. It's done.
I think they released some more tickets today, but those are probably gone too, man.
There it is.
That was very popular.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and you've done one of those before?
I've done a lot of those before.
Okay,
Scrap is sort of the leading, and Scrap is actually Japanese also.
Yep.
And they are the leading company that does the Real Escape games.
So I've never done a Real Escape.
Okay.
What are they like?
There's two different kinds. The kind that Zelda is they bring in 200 people into the room, and then you're sitting at a table about this size, just like 6 people to a table, and then you get a packet of puzzles, and you open it up, and there's stuff all around the room, but it's not, you don't have to ransack the room like the other type of game, which is like an escape the room game.
Okay.
All it is there's like, there'll be clues kind of like maybe up on the wall. So a couple people have to go find all the clues, write down stuff, and then bring it back to the table, and then they'll use the clues that are written on the wall with the puzzles that you have in the packet. The way that Scrap does it, it's all a bunch of mini puzzles. So in fact, if you're going to do this Zelda thing, listen up, because this is how they work it. It starts out with a bunch of mini puzzles, and then there's a meta puzzle where as you enter in the answers to the minis, you start to work towards one big answer, and then that one big answer gives you the clue that the next thing that you're supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And so basically the idea, and also Scrap has what we affectionately refer to as, at the end, the scrap screw job, which is where you think you're done, but you're not. And you have to...
Spoilers!
You have to remember... This is not a spoiler.
Okay.
You have to remember to listen to everything they tell you. Sometimes they'll make an announcement at the beginning of the game, and they'll say, and by the way, defenders of the Triforce, don't forget that... the
sky is blue. Just make something up.
Yeah, the sky is blue. Exactly. And so then when you get to the very end and you think you've solved the puzzle, you have to remember back to like, oh, but they said the sky is blue, so let's cross out the letters SKY and write in the letters BLUE, and then that's the real fight.
That's cool.
That kind of thing. So be ever vigilant. Be vigilant.
I want a Zelda
down,
like the puzzle solution jingle when you finish. Like I just want to hear.
I'm sure they'll work that in. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen because this is the first. They don't typically do this thing where if you buy tickets to this Zelda thing, you can pay an extra $20 and get a limited edition Zelda coin and a poster and stuff like that. So I hope they really do a good job.
Have they done licensed IP before? Like just like
they have. They
like
did
this?
Zero Escape, and in fact, I believe in Japan they've actually done a Resident Evil game also. But yeah, they did a Zero Escape game down in LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So to the point though, this definitely is, it feels like Nintendo is like with the Universal thing and the Zelda thing, it feels like that Nintendo is saying yes a little bit more now to these like tie-up kind of things.
The Vans thing? Vans cross Nintendo?
Exactly. Yeah.
This sounds like an opportunity to play like a real-life Zelda-themed Sam & Max. Like, I that sounds incredible. I want to do this.
Right.
Really, is it that adventure gamey? I mean, it's just puzzle after puzzle?
It's really more about like logic puzzles.
Okay.
It's about like buying an issue of Games magazine, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember those.
And doing like, the pen and paper
I'd
puzzles
probably
in there.
be terrible. I have like
It's
a
that kind of
shriveled
stuff.
raisin in my puzzle solving
Well,
part of my head.
you have to, the thing is, if you show up alone, and I think a lot of people probably did buy like one ticket or two tickets, they'll group you up with strangers.
Yeah, that's why I didn't buy the ticket. I didn't have a group.
And I'm telling you, you're not going to win. Okay. Unless there's a group of 5 people who work really well together and they're already puzzle solving friends, and they just happen to put you on that team.
Wait, are you taking the good job brain kids to this? Are you guys just gonna roll in?
Not even
steamroll it?
So our team. There's me. There's our friend Tyler Hinman, who is a 5-time American crossword puzzle tournament champion.
It's a Kohler to show up with the most prepared group.
But we still lose sometimes. These things are hard. Like Scrap prides themselves, and I think they'll make the Zelda game a little bit easier. Yeah. But they tend to pride themselves on having a really, really low success rate.
Okay.
Really low.
Okay.
Which is interesting because because it's a Zelda thing, that ticket sold out so quick because I think they're going to get so many people who have never done any of their escape games before.
Totally.
Oh, and so anyway, the scrap things, the way the Zelda thing is going to work with the 200 people in a room and it's all divided up into teams, that is, it's different from the typical room escapes that you hear about, which Scrap does this too, but it's just you and maybe like a group of like 6 to 10 people, and you're literally just locked in a small room like this, and you have to like open drawers and flip furniture over and
you're on
that
a timer.
kind of things, and open up safes
out.
and stuff like that, and you're on a timer. Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yep. Anyway.
No, but that's a lot of fun. All right, so we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about the NES Classic Edition Scarcity at Retail and some other things that tie into Nintendo's classic label, including Chris's list of games for our SNES classics. It's gonna be good. We'll be right back.
Listen.
And welcome back. Jose Otero here with Jared Petty and Chris Kohler. So, guys, we should talk about, a lot of frustration right now for Nintendo fans. The big frustration is that the Nintendo Entertainment System NES Classic Edition is really hard to find right now. And we knew this. We've said this. We said this since it was announced.
They announced it, and I think literally the first things out of my mouth was like, You better take however many you think you're going to need and like triple it.
Yeah. And so this week we want to just let you know our frustrations really quick and tell you what we think of this, because we understand the frustration. And I have to say,
it's Amiibo all over again. 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 It's Amiibo all over again.
I hope you understand where we're coming from. It is disappointing to see Nintendo put out conservative numbers once again for the hardware. That's how they've always been. But regardless, we hear you. And it's sad, like ultimately, right? We've got that out of our system. Everybody okay?
Totally.
Yeah, I'm now ready for a mature discussion of this problem. Yes.
All right, cool. Or a mature discussion of our SNES Classic list.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, because it's going to get better. Like Amiibo, it will get better, right? NES Classic, it will.
The Nintendo is, So a lot of people say, oh, they're doing this because
for scarcity.
They want the Takeo Miyamo effect, and they want all the articles written. And I think that's a good side effect for them. I think Nintendo is just like paranoid conservative. I think that Nintendo, especially Nintendo of America,
that's what I was going to say.
I think what keeps Reggie up at night is his recurring nightmare is that he orders too many of something, that he convinces Japan, okay, I'm going to go all in on this, and then they don't sell. And then Nintendo is stuck with inventory in the channel, and they have to reduce the price, and it's a big black
or
eye.
Buy it
and
back.
then instead of sending dollars to Japan, Reggie has to tell Japan that he lost money on something. Yeah. I think that is what frightens Nintendo of America, and that's why we will always see this very skittish initial they put exactly as many out there as they absolutely knew they were going to sell, and then they're like, okay, and then we'll put out more, and they will never make a big bet. They will make a big order once they understand. Once they look at eBay and they're like, okay, well, if it's selling for $200 on eBay and our retail price is $60, this is how many more we have to put out there to bring that. But they're only going to do it once they have the data.
But what compounded the problem was the no pre-order zone, right? That's the thing that really upset a lot of folks.
It's why didn't they just put out pre-orders and just use that to gauge how many they should have available?
And that's the thing. All right, so happy times. Unless you got one more thing.
All I got to say is I don't know what you guys are complaining about. I got one.
Okay, there it is. Posa, right here on the show. All right, so we've been building a SNES Classic Edition list because we believe on this show, as anyone with a brain, that once you saw that Nintendo Classics label,
you knew. It's a product line.
Yeah.
And they're going to make more. Why wouldn't they make more?
Yeah, it would be silly not to. So we have some more thoughts on the Classics label as a whole, but we're going to share those in a minute. The list so far, I'm just going to recap it as fast as I can. ActRaiser, Contra 3D Alien Wars, Super Mario World. We took All-Stars off, sorry. You'll live. Zelda, A Link to the Past, Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Yoshi's Island. It was Final Fantasy 3 in America, by the way. Star Fox, Kirby Superstar, Super Mario Kart, Earthbound, Harvest Moon, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest, Mega Man X, F-Zero, NBA Jam, Tactics Ogre, Super Ghosts and Ghouls. I hope I said that right, because I always screw up the titles of those games.
Super Ghouls and Ghosts.
Ghouls and Ghosts. Thank you. Sorry, I knew I got this right here.
It's okay.
Super Mario RPG, Secret of Mana, and Super Castlevania 4. So, what are your 5 games, Chris?
What are my 5? Well, first of all, let me tell you where you guys are going way off base, which is there's no way in heck that anybody is going to go back and relicense all the NBA players for NBA Jam.
Do not kill my dream, Chris Kohler.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you because I played a lot of that game, and I'm not a sports game fan or a sports fan. That is absolutely an integral part of 16-bit game culture is NBA Jam, and really of Super Nintendo game culture as well. But it's not happening. And
so take Patrick Ewing's name off the sprite, but make it look like Patrick Ewing. No, I'm kidding. I hear you. I hear what you're saying.
So much.
It would be a lot of work.
To be fair, there is a game that I'm going to list at the end of my list where that actually has to have a similar hatchet job done to it. But it's going to be a little bit easier for them to do this, and there's more of an incentive to do it. Also, Tactics Ogre did not come out in America.
Yeah.
Ogre Battle. Came
so
out
I got to double check that's what Pear meant. I may have screwed that up in the list that I put together. Yeah, I will double check with Pear. Apologies for that,
But otherwise, you've hit all the major role-playing games that I would have said. You've covered all the even ActRaiser. Even ActRaiser is already
first
on
one
there.
from Jeff Gerstmann.
That was what I was going to say. Yeah. So I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking, okay, what are you guys totally missing? You are totally missing a Super Punch-Out! That is my first game. Okay. Super Punch-Out! It is completely owned by Nintendo. No licensing has to happen. It's a third-party game. This thing is going to have half Nintendo games on it. Super Punch-Out, obviously. There's a lot of people out there who say it's better than Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! I'm not going to take a position on that, but all I'm going to say is Super Punch-Out! Is an amazing game. And of course, it needs to be on there.
Sorry.
And quite frankly, rounds out our lists a little bit, which is a little bit platformer and RPG heavy at this point. We need some Super Punch-Out.
Yeah. Great choice.
That's a delightful game.
Thank you. Really important that be on there. Game number 2.
Okay.
Again, kind of shocked this is not on there, considering the licensing is already done. It was a huge part of 16-bit culture, and anybody would expect this to be on the SNES Classic. Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
I was hoping someone would pick one Street Fighter.
Now, here's the thing. You don't want Street Fighter 2 because Street Fighter 2 Turbo is better. It is everything that the original Street Fighter 2 is and more. Super Street Fighter 2, the SNES port, is not as beloved. It's not as good of a port, and people think it's in some ways kind of a step backwards. The implementation of super moves. I did my research on this one. A lot of Street Fighter fans, they believe that the best SNES Street Fighter is Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Okay.
I do not think the SNES Classic should be loaded. It should not have more than one Street Fighter game. It should have just one, and that should be Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Okay. Great choice. I've been waiting for someone to put one on there, but I didn't want to commit. So
all right,
next
great.
one.
So no weird version of Alpha 2 or anything like that?
No weird version of Alpha 2. No. And I think it's great that, I played SNES Alpha 2 a lot because I didn't have a PlayStation yet. You know what I mean? As soon as I got a PlayStation, I think the first game I bought was Street Fighter Alpha 2.
Nice.
But SNES Alpha 2, maybe not so great. But if you were to put a second one on there, that's what I'd say to put on there because it's a different game. You know what I mean? It's different. It's not just another iteration. Your third game is Pocky and Rocky.
Oh.
Remember, Natsume is already doing virtual console games.
Yes.
Pocky and Rocky is owned by them, and absolutely it is a really fun 2-player simultaneous overhead cute adorable action game.
Yep.
The original SNES cartridge is now worth like $150 or something like that for the cartridge, and it would, again, sort of round things out. And also, Natsume is already working with a virtual console, so it would probably be a very easy thing to license and put on there.
Really fun game, too. There was a GBA version, I think, of Pocky and Rocky. I just can't remember which one made it. But excellent choice. No, I completely agree. Next. What's next on your list?
Next on my list. Oh, geez, I forget. Hold on.
Okay.
I know the last one on my list, and I'm blanking on the fourth
Ready
one.
to drop the mic.
I thought I had memorized everything, and I feel kind of embarrassed because I
going to jump in with Metal Marines.
My fourth game.
Yep. No worries.
In just a second.
Pocky and Rocky.
That's right.
That's a good choice. I like that.
Pocky and Rocky's good. Okay. Again, another Nintendo first-party game that has not been mentioned yet, which I think would again round things out a lot more. Underappreciated classic. Kirby's Dream Course.
Yes.
Kirby's
More
Dream
than
Course.
one Kirby game? All right, go.
All right.
Why
Kirby's Dream Course is not a platforming game. First of all, hey, Kirby is a bankable as heck franchise.
That's true.
NES Classic has Zelda and Zelda 2. It has all the Marios. It has Mario. It has 4 Mario games and Donkey Kong and 2 Castlevania games. You can have more than one.
Yes, true. True.
And I wouldn't necessarily, I would say Kirby Superstar over Kirby's Dream Land 3, but Kirby's Dream Course is a really fun, incredibly unique miniature golf type game starring Kirby. And that is a real gem on the Super Nintendo's library. And again, Nintendo owns the whole thing, no problem.
Okay.
Big fan of Dream Course.
So
it's
good.
A wonderful game.
Nice.
Game number 5. This is so clutch. This will require Nintendo to either A, pay for a license, which I actually don't think is going to happen for a reason we're going to discuss, or 2, hack the ROM. I think that they should hack the ROM. Looking long-term, Nintendo should hack this ROM so they can continue to sell it without having the license attached to it. A license that never should have been attached to it in the first place. That game is Tetris Attack.
Oh.
It is Tetris Attack.
Okay.
This is known as Panel de Pon in Japan, where it does not have the Tetris license.
Yep.
It is known as Puzzle League in every other iteration.
It's now, it's Animal Crossing now. They just
it's in Animal Crossing now.
Yeah.
Yep, it's everywhere else. It's in Puzzle League, Pokemon Puzzle League, and N64. In the U.S., it's called Tetris Attack, and they redid the whole thing to star characters from Yoshi's Island. I believe... So first of all, the Tetris company officially regrets giving Nintendo the licensing the Tetris name for this game, which has nothing to do with Tetris.
Right.
So for Nintendo to bring it out again, they'd need to retitle. Fortunately, I think all they would need to do is just edit the title screen and just remove references to the word Tetris, which I think are few and far between. I'll give you a title. You're going to call it Yoshi's Puzzle League.
Okay.
Simple
Sounds
but
good.
high concept. You get what it is.
Yep.
Retitle it that, and then put that on the SNES Classic again to round out things with a puzzle game. Yeah. Also, it's very popular, and quite frankly, if they do a Super Famicom Classic, you will see Panel Dip on there because that's really big in Japan.
Yeah, no, and it's probably one of my favorite, very elegant puzzle games. I mean, it's sort of the Match 3 concept, but you're rotating a cube.
Yeah.
Just for folks who may not know it, right? Because last time it came out before this Animal Crossing version, and not counting Virtual Console, it was actually on DS. They took a chance on it, called it Planet Puzzle League, and put it out.
It did really well.
Stylus-based. Yeah, it's stylus-based, and it did really well. No, it's a good one. That is a good one.
Well, I thought about this long and hard.
Yeah.
I looked at I had, because of course when the NES Classic was announced, everybody kind of put together their dream list of Super Nintendo games. So I compared my list to your list. I looked at what publishers are involved in Virtual Console.
Yeah.
At this point, like what is actually realistic.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't say, and we can't put it on the list because it's not one of my 5, but there is no Final Fight game yet on the list.
Yes.
Which I think would be. And I wouldn't say do the original Final Fight because it doesn't have 2-player.
No.
And Final Fight 3 is just okay, but Final Fight 2 is considered to be really good. So I would say that would be.
You're going to be ironic and pick Final Fight Guy. Yeah,
I was going to say.
Well, Final Fight Guy doesn't have. No, it's not.
It does.
It's not
Yeah,
two-player.
you want the later one.
Yeah, so forget about that.
Yeah.
You really want to make sure that these things have as many 2-player games as you can get on.
That's
there.
right.
Especially if, I mean, a SNES Classic, like it's got to have, as you guys have said, it's got to have Final Fantasy 3. It's got to have Earthbound. It's got to have Chrono Trigger. It really needs Secret of Mana.
Yeah.
And Activate. Now it's so RPG heavy.
Yeah.
What I want. I didn't interrupt.
Go ahead.
What I want to happen so desperately, it never will. But in addition to selling a second controller, I want him to sell a mouse packaged with Mario Paint so bad.
Wouldn't that
for
be
this
neat?
thing?
Wouldn't that be neat?
Like a code that unlocks Mario Paint, something, and to sell a mouse. That'd be. I'd love that.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. But Chris, let's talk a little bit about the business of this, though, right? Like, Nintendo Classics as sort of a new label for Nintendo. So there is that hurdle, right? Like getting the license again or renewing the license. How painful can that process be?
I mean, if you look at NES Classic and the fact that like they were able to sew up all these third-party games, as long as it's something that's already kind of they already did the deal on Virtual Console, probably not that bad. Yeah. And I wonder if I don't know about the behind the scenes, but I mean, I wonder if when they were doing the deals for Wii U Virtual Console, if they were doing these deals for Wii U and any other Nintendo platforms that Nintendo may make in the future. Maybe like that's what it was, and the deals were already in place, and Nintendo just says, yeah, these are the games we're putting on it, and this is how much money you're going to get. Like maybe that's already done. Yeah. It would be in Nintendo's interest to not have to relitigate that every single time with every single publisher.
Do you think having a decade worth of Virtual Console testbed data to draw from now, I mean, is making the process easier? Built relationships, they know what's going to work.
They don't have to guess anymore. Yeah. There's no guesswork as to what games are popular because they know. We don't know because they'll never report sales, but they know. Yep.
All right.
And it just makes it so much easier to add these games on to sort of fill out a list of 30 games instead of having to worry for each individual game, should we do this or not?
I have one question that I haven't checked out on this thing. Do you guys know if they bothered to ESRB these games this time around? They did?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
The NES Classic has an ESRB rating on it. I did check that out.
Yeah, Virtual Console games have them too, don't they?
I believe they do.
Yeah, they have, yeah.
I think they have in the past.
Through the Wii. Yeah. So then the bigger looming question and the thing that we've all guessed at is that the Classics label will mean more machines, right?
Yeah.
So the hanging question then becomes, what does Nintendo's Classic label, which starts with the NES Classic Edition, mean for the Switch, the future of Nintendo, and specifically Virtual Console? Because this is the first time where Nintendo, as you put this once I've read actually, it basically is going where the gamers are, like people who did not buy a Wii U or a 3DS.
We talked about at the top of the show about people keep asking Nintendo to put the original Super Mario Brothers on the iPhone. That would suck, but this is that. This is hey, do you want to play the original Super Mario Brothers? Great. Go to Target, buy this thing. It's $60. You bring it home, you play the original Super Mario Brothers again. And not only that, I mean, this is so much more compelling than Virtual Console because Virtual Console is just a piece of software. It's just a ROM running on a new gaming platform. But this replicates the controller, and it replicates that feel. It's got that cool menu music, the CRT filter. And when you look in front of you, you're holding onto this controller, and you see a little mini NES sitting on your table. That really does a lot, I think, for replicating as best they can the full experience of what it was like to play a game like this, especially the fact that it comes with that controller. So the thing is, I would rather have, if it was just me, I'd just rather a virtual console, like sell me the Nintendo platform. I'll put my new games, my old games, everything all on one platform. But for the average person, as I think we're going to see, especially over the next year as this thing continues to sell, that's really what they want. And this is really hitting them where they live. And that's why I think this is such a mainstream console to the extent that, the Wii U wasn't.
Yeah. Jared, what do you think?
I think that Chris has a tremendous point about the tactile, of the fact that touching on something, I mean, you're a collector. I used to be a collector. That holding on to a piece of history has power. It evokes memories you didn't know existed. When you run back and find something you forgot was there. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that. Not as many as should be right now because they can't get it, but those who have it are experiencing that right now. So I like that. I do think that as we look forward to Switch, that we may very well see unified branding. The one thing, the original Wii Virtual Console was superb emulation for the most part. Across most of the platforms. It was truly, truly wonderful, especially compared to what had come before.
What came after, not as good.
Not as good.
Wii U, sadly.
No, the Wii could output low resolution, like real low resolution graphics, which means that if you took that thing and plugged it into a CRT, it would literally look exactly.
Which is what I did. And love it. I still keep my Wii plugged into this day for that reason. But the one thing that they never got right on Wii Virtual Console, I felt, was creating a sense of context. They did not provide. You didn't feel like you were wrapped up in the manual. You didn't feel like you were wrapped up in the music, the experience, the why this game was.
Very true.
And not just nostalgia. Nostalgia's part of it. But actually, if you don't have the nostalgia, a reason to appreciate it. There was that too. The NES Classic provides that hook.
Minus manuals. I mean, you got to go online to see those, but yes, I completely agree.
It provides something very like that. I think we'll see an increased focus in the Switch and beyond on the classic branding toward creating more context. They realize they got a winner in that, so why not build that out? And also Nintendo they do a better job of celebrating and remembering their own history, speaking very broadly, than most game companies, and I think they're just going to keep getting better at it.
When there's a product involved, I feel like the reason you'll see Nintendo go absolutely silent on larger anniversaries, like, I don't know, Metroid. There's smaller celebrations of it. Don't get me wrong. Like Miitomo had a brief Metroid promotion. Actually, if you go and you look at like My Nintendo Rewards now, a lot of them are Metroid themed. That's a nice acknowledgement, but it's not the same as when you go all out on a product, and they constantly, time and again, prove that they only seem interested when there's something to sell.
You're right, and sometimes when they do that, they still do it, halfway. I think about that terrible Mario All-Stars thing for Wii. So there are I guess, but when they get it right, it's
Did they
lovely.
Get the manual on that one. Just sorry.
And that nice book. Yeah, there was a lot
Mike
of cool
Drucker worked
there.
on that thing. That was awesome thing to hear about. Yeah, no, he told us about.
I used to have my red Japanese Wii with my Mario 25th hack draw on it. And I was like, that's fun.
I think the future of the idea of, and I don't think anyone anticipated or thought of Nintendo putting faith in a disconnected from the internet device that perceivably seems cheap to make. You can keep the price low. It's plug and play, as simple as it gets. Like you're not fiddling with 720p or 1080p or all of these different settings. It's very streamlined. So you just plug it in and you go. I don't think folks saw that coming, and I think you guys absolutely have nailed that point of the nostalgia play of look and feel is it. And it's interesting because in Japan, the one thing missing, I feel, from the Famicom Mini is just that in order for those controllers to fit in those slots on the side of that machine, they made them a lot smaller. I don't know if you've seen one of them up close, but that was a design decision they made, whereas in America, you're getting a controller that is roughly the size of the console.
It's interesting because in Japan, that Famicom Mini, I feel like because the controllers are so small, it feels like a throwaway novelty item that's not meant to be played. But the NES is really built for long-term gameplay.
Yeah, I wonder if they were trying to tap in. Japan, you've been there enough times to know they kind of have a long legacy of nostalgia-oriented tiny video game products that sell in main. It's not just a game store or a throwback store. You can walk into a loft and you're going to find, tiny themed nostalgic cartridges or little noisemakers. Loft is like a mainstream.
It's like Urban Outfitters.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Really?
Thank you. It's like if
it's like Caldor.
Like a very like curated selection of home goods, but also records, but very much like sort of for the hipster house. Basically.
Yeah, and they sell those, and that's a mainstream chain. People shop there. Moms and dads and grandmas and children are all there, and they sell these, and they've sold them for a very long time. I wonder if they were trying to tap into that association. That's been my operant assumption on this. But.
I mean, I feel like I don't know. I think that. Japan looks at this thing because we've had these plug and play systems in the US for a decade or more. Mm-hmm. Japan has no history of this. Like there has never been an Atari flashback in Japan that's been really big. Yeah. So for Japan, I think they're looking at this going, that's cool. This is a cool little thing. Yeah. But like I feel like people in the US are maybe going to I think Japan is going to realize like whoops, people are logging a lot of hours into this thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because you know what I think is going to happen when they do another version of this, it's going to be their version will be shaped like the AV Famicom, and then it'll actually have full size controller.
One would hope. Well, and Japan also has vehicles to sell this stuff. I mean, look at Game Center CX. I mean, that is absolutely a commercial, and they've used Areno in Nintendo marketing to sell that stuff. So if you don't know what that is, it is sort of basically a Japanese show, a show where the host challenges himself to play really old games that are very hard, and he's not traditionally a gamer, you can say. Right. He's a comedian.
Yeah.
And he makes really fun jokes, but he also tries other segments that are hilarious. There's a lot of research on it. You should check it out. We've talked about this on the show before, but
there's still old games are still very much a part of the sort of
consciousness.
The consciousness, absolutely.
Yeah. Game Center CX is a show that's so energetic that even if you don't understand the language, you'll find yourself laughing along a lot of the time. I like that about it.
It was really. Did you see there's a photograph out there of somebody at like a worker at Yodobashi Camera holding up a sign that says like because Famicom Mini and PS4 Pro launched on the same day.
That's right.
The weakest game system ever and the most powerful game system ever are literally launched in the same. And he's holding up a big sign that has the Famicom Mini logo and the PS4 Pro logo, and above the Famicom Mini it's like sold out.
Wow, that's a good photo. So then looking at how well they nailed at least the idea, short controller cords aside, because 2.5-foot cords is probably the one misstep in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. There's potential for other classics. We've built a list for the SNES Classic Edition, but okay, let's go down the list. I mean, is there a world where there's a Game Boy Classic? And what is it?
If Nintendo is smart, they will. I mean, this is. I guarantee you, this is the hot holiday product of whatever year they decide to bring it out, but they have to do it the right way, which is to say. It's first of all, it's not the size of the brick Game Boy, but it is more the size of the Game Boy Pocket.
Yep.
Okay. Game Boy Pocket, I think it feels a fine size. Yeah. The size of the Game Boy Pocket. You paint it like the original Game Boy. Yeah. Something. It's not necessarily the mold of the Game Boy Pocket. It's the mold of the brick, but smaller. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Paint it like the original Game Boy, and you load it up with. First of all, it has to have Tetris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which Nintendo did license for the 3DS. It was on the store for a while, so it's possible.
Yep.
That has to have Game Boy Tetris. Mm-hmm. And then it has to have Pokemon. Mm-hmm. And then by the time you've got Tetris and Pokemon on there, I don't even care what the rest of the games are, because you've already sold 2 million units.
Yeah, do you front light it? How do you light it? Do you use a standard screen and just emulate? Do you do a backlit?
You can. It would have to be backlit. Yeah. But like a backlit really nice definition black and white LCD screen at this point is fine. Yeah. And I think they should just stick with black and white.
Yeah, and that was the thing black and white. When I look at them, just like, but black and white Game Boy games, it's just they seem so far behind the kind of entertainment you can take out of your pocket, right?
So,
and the kind of thing.
People are going to take this is about recreating the context, as you say, of feeling like you're playing Tetris on an old Game Boy or Pokemon on a classic Game Boy. If they put that out, you will not be able to walk into a train car in Japan without seeing people with these things.
Yeah, especially with the kind of battery life you can
on them.
get out of it now, especially with some of the technology. But
Yeah.
I would want Game Boy Advance, and I know folks would probably, like, there's some folks who just drop their iPhone or whatever they're listening on. I would prefer Game Boy Advance only because those games look better. They don't necessarily sound better, sadly. I mean, because Game Boy Advance sound processor was sort of what it was.
I'm not saying you can't have Game Boy Advance. I'm saying that the first thing they should do would be Game Boy, and they should just keep it to black and white games.
I'm willing to buy them both. I'm worried about. I'm just trying to figure out how I turn this beautiful arrangement into a way I can get Ghost Babel. If I can make that happen. Which is right smack in the middle of those two worlds. There's about 5 Game Boy Color games between those two generations that I don't want to see left out.
The thing is, when you start looking at the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color libraries, and even, quite frankly, the Game Boy Advance library, it's a lot of licensed stuff that's never going to come back.
Right.
So it's actually not that difficult to get a list of 30 games on the Game Boy and not really feel like you're missing anything realistic. Mm-hmm. Also, look, Nintendo tried black and white Virtual Console on the 3DS.
Yeah.
Now that that's over, that is it for these companies. If they want to exploit their old Game Boy games, like, you're not going to be able to do it anymore unless Nintendo builds a Game Boy Classic. And then contextually, again, it makes more sense. And then people will buy black and white Game Boy games again on this thing.
Yeah.
$50, $60, cheap LCD screen. And the thing is, if maybe it turns out that color screens are cheaper than black and white.
Yeah.
And they'll buy a color screen. But I think because of the aspect ratio, I think you really want that square screen. I think you want Game Boy and maybe Game Boy Color, but honestly, I think they should just go with. You know why?
Yeah, I think
you know why
those libraries
you're going to
together.
do just black and white, because as soon as it's color, then it's like, well, where's Pokemon Gold, Silver?
Yeah.
That's another machine.
Right.
Yeah.
Game Boy Color is another machine. It has Pokemon Gold and Silver on it. It comes out the next year, 2 years later.
Yeah, you're right. Tetris, Tetris, Pokemon, and I want Donkey Kong. And
Donkey Kong.
You can get every good game on there because all the good games, most of the good games are made by Nintendo.
Yeah.
You get, you put Final Fantasy Adventure on there, whatever.
Sure.
But Game Boy Classic,
maintain relationships.
There is no scenario in which that is not a huge hit with the mainstream for people, because every mom, there's a picture of Hillary Clinton playing what is probably Tetris. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not Mole Mania, am I right? On a Game Boy, people will buy this thing.
Well, and then there's the obvious point, which we've made already, but the SNES Classic is the 90s nostalgia is in, or has been in for some time now. You could even go up to the N64 era and easily make an N64 looking box.
And the thing is, the internals, I don't know about the Game Boy, but like the internals of the NES Classic, you just reflash that with a SNES emulator. Now it's the SNES Classic.
Yeah.
You reflash it with it. That's a powerful. It's a 4-core ARM processor.
Yeah.
Like, you flash that with an N64 emulator, and then it's an N64. The N64. Here's the problem with N64 Classic. It's got to have 4 controller ports.
Yep.
So already that's kind of weird.
Yep.
And it's and then the controller itself is going to be much more expensive to make as a thumbstick and everything.
Yeah.
So N60, and then when you look at how many games can we put on this thing, can you even get to 30? Like, can you even get to 30 realistic games?
Realistic games that you wouldn't have to license.
N64 Classic might actually be a bridge too far.
Well, and there's nothing here either that sort of takes into account if the market gets tired, right? If the market says, oh, I have one already, or I've bought 2 of these. Yeah. Because they're disconnected devices. I mean, do you flip that switch and say,
again,
online?
Atari Flat? No. I don't think so, because then it's like you got to support it. Yep. You got to have the online infrastructures, all this stuff that you got to do.
Messy.
It gets super messy. And why do that? Because I don't think that that consumer does not want that. As soon as you want to start downloading games online, get it.
Part of the appeal is that we've talked about all all of this, but I don't think we brought this up. There aren't a lot of easy ways to play these games in HD unless you're willing to jump through hoops anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's yes, you had Wii U, but for the average consumer doesn't have a Wii U in their living room, it's not like they're going to hook their PC up or their Raspberry Pi and run an emulator into their HDMI port. This is a simple plug-and-play solution.
There's a lot of gamer tunnel vision on this product, because I think if you are a gamer, if you own an Xbox One, if you own a Wii U, you look at NES Classic and you're like, well, obviously, why would anybody buy this when you can just get a Raspberry Pi and load it with emulators? Yeah. It's like, because you've just eliminated 99% of the human population.
Yeah, who would be willing to do it?
That is already too much for them to do.
Yeah. No, completely agree.
It's some Linux or something.
So let's pull back then to Switch and Virtual Console. What does this do to those? I think it does nothing. I think it does not hurt. I don't think it hurts those products only because I think Nintendo is going to stick to our platforms are going to play the backward stuff. I think we should offer that to the core consumer because that's not necessarily the person who wants an NES Classic to begin with.
So I have a lot of thoughts about this. Okay. Number one, I feel like it's finally time to get rid of the name Virtual Console. I don't think that Nintendo... Like, it was fine when that was the only thing that was on the eShop, you know? But, like, now it's just sort of like, it doesn't need to be its own branding. Just put all the games together and sort of, like, you don't do it with big, bold category headers. Do it with tags, you know? Everything, these are tagged. And I think
don't name it Nintendo Classics, not apply it to both worlds?
I think you could. I think you get rid of the Virtual Console branding, and I think when these games show up in the store, they're called Classics. Okay. And you see that Nintendo...
Classics logo.
Classics logo.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Virtual Console doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what is that? It's like, oh, well, it's old Nintendo games. It's like, well, why the hell not call it old Nintendo games?
Classics makes more sense.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think it does. I think that you run into a problem when you can buy this thing and it's full of 30 games that come out to $2 a game, right? You run into a problem trying to sell those same games for $5 on the Switch. But then you run into a problem where it's like, does Nintendo want to take these games and have them for $1.99 each on the Switch? Because then you have a store full of amazing games for $2 each. Then people are trying to sell you games for $60 each in the same store. And Nintendo, this may be kind of a conflict for Nintendo, right?
So do you mitigate this by saying this is the time that you buy it for $5 and you have it forever? Is that how you do that?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, well, because one of the really important things about the Switch is that, like, this is Nintendo. This is just the first form factor for basically Nintendo iOS.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be.
Maybe that's how they justify paying $5. They're like, you're paying $5 this time, but you got it forever now.
Or maybe they should come out and say, look, we guarantee you for the next 10 years, whatever. Or for the next 10 years, every Nintendo platform that we put out is going to play this copy of this game, and that's it.
See, I kind of look at it as it would make a lot of people happy if the day Switch goes live, is up for sale, much like your PlayStation 3, if it's a game that is available for Switch from that back catalog and it's part of the classics, you get it. The minute you open that box, you already own it.
I think that they should do that.
That was the coolest thing about PS4 for me. The day I got one, I was like, oh, I already own like 5 games, and I'd even that's not even counting the one I just bought.
I know.
I may have said PS3.
I'm kind of on pins and needles wondering how are they going to approach that. I really don't know. Okay. I can tell you a story in which the NES Classic comes out, people get super excited about old Nintendo games again, and then it becomes a major selling point for the Switch to say, oh, well, this also plays all the old Nintendo games that you guys love again now. And then I can tell you a story in which Nintendo doesn't like to multitask, and they're like, okay, well, it's like, well, yeah, we have Super Mario Brothers on the Switch, and we have Zelda on the Switch, but we're not really going gung-ho into trying to get all these publishers to put all their old games on the Switch, because the way you play these games now is you play your NES Classic. And if you want Super Nintendo games, you buy a Super NES Classic. And they try to shuttle people off to playing those because they're so popular. If the NES Classic, SNES Classic, whatever come out and they sell way more of those than they ever sold downloadable copies of Zelda: Link to the Past on Wii U, Nintendo could go, we're dumb for ever putting these games on Switch. Let's just do these little mini consoles, and that's all we're going to do.
See, I don't know. I don't want to see a day where I feel spoiled during this 3DS and Wii U era, which, by the way, obviously those didn't do as well as in terms of products for Nintendo, but it is cool to leave the house for the 3DS and play a Super Mario World or play through Earthbound the way I want to. And I think that the problem with NES Classic or dedicating it to these offline consoles that have to be tied plug and play essentially, they don't leave the house. They're not like, I think the core Nintendo fan would be disappointed, but then again, sometimes when are they not? I'm not sure. In some cases, not to put that out there.
That's a lucid observation.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that, but it's sort of, I landed there when you heard it.
That's an in-group joke, Jose.
That's
an in-group joke.
Totally.
We all fall into that bucket.
Totally. But yeah, I guess we'll see. Any other
we
thoughts
will
to add,
again.
though?
I don't know. It's like, again, I can see it going one of two ways. I can see them. I can see them diving into Switch and going, yeah, all the old Nintendo games, GameCube games on Switch, or I can see them actually not pursuing that. If anything, I mean, the NES Classic is the first like green shoots in a long time that show that Nintendo is really interested in getting people interested again in its older games. All we've really seen from the beginning of Virtual Consoles, Nintendo started up here and we're like, yeah, Virtual Console. And then it's just been a steadily declining lack of interest from Nintendo.
Yeah, that first couple of years were pretty strong, and they gave us a controller that turned sideways, and then it just vanished.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
I want to say, 2006 to 2008,
for
maybe?
3 years up through about 2008, 2009, and it was like, I mean, God, we get to 2009, 2010, they're releasing imports. They brought out Sin and Punishment.
Yep.
They
so exciting.
and until then, I mean, they just don't seem as like gung ho about it anymore.
I was living in Japan at the time. You could buy Windjammers and Waku Waku 8 on a Wii. It was just amazing.
Yeah. No, totally. Well, I mean, between now, if they don't talk about it in January, we'll definitely hear about what the strategy is by March.
I think January is when we find out, because January they're going to unveil everything, and then if they don't talk about it, that's January is when you're going to have executive interviews. That's when you're really going to have people sitting down with executives and saying, okay, what is the plan for this? What is the plan for that?
Yeah.
And so we will start to get that information.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. It fascinates me to like think of a world where Nintendo would stop doing that, but you're right, it can go one of two ways.
It's only if they start making way more money off of these classic systems than they had. Again, when Nintendo was like, oh, we're going to do black and white Game Boy games on the 3DS. And then like that lasted for a year. And they're like, nope, hold on. Let's go. Forget about that. We're just going to do NES games on the 3DS. Nope, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing Super Nintendo games. And even on the Wii U, it was like when they started doing Game Boy Advance games, like they put the kibosh on any other game from any other platform. They're very narrow as far as like, oh, this is no, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah. And if anything, I mean, from interviews, I feel like when Dan Edelman left Nintendo, there was an interview where he said that part of the problem too with Virtual Console, if I remember right, was that it was just hard to line things up so that you can keep the momentum going after you launched this game or this collection of games. We got like 3 this week, next week nothing. But then the following 2 weeks we got this. That becomes part of the challenge as well. Chris, thank you so much for coming.
Oh
in
yeah,
week.
guys!
Super fun.
It was a pleasure. So nice that I mean, I feel like we just saw each other.
It was a few weeks ago, right?
And all that stuff. It was not that long ago. Yes.
All right. So where can folks find you on the internet?
My Twitter handle is Kobunheat, Kobunheat. You will find me talking about NES Classic a lot actually these days. If you come check me out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you go to chriskohler.biz, that's like my personal site, and you will find there .biz.
Oh shit.
.biz. Chriskohler.biz. And that's where you can find information about Power Up.
Okay.
You can find my recommendations for where to buy old video games in Akihabara, and also where to eat Japanese curry in Japan.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So.
Let me tell you, Chris is one heck of a Sherpa. During TGS, we went out. We had, what was that place called?
It's called Hinoya Curry.
Yeah, yes.
There's one that's in Akihabara where Jose and I went. It's so good. It's my new favorite.
Chris is
your
like
favorite?
Yeah.
Chris was like, "What do you want?" And I said, "You order everything. It's going to be fun. I trust your taste palette." And it was incredible. Like it was so good.
Japanese curry is about my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah.
So I can't wait. I cannot wait.
This place. I found out about them because they won the grand prize in the curry tournament in 2013, and I've been hearing about them since. And then they opened up a branch in Akihabara. It's like right across from Super Potato, one of the best video game stores. So I landed in Japan and went over there for dinner. You know, the day I landed, and I'm like, okay, let's try this out. It's so good. It's very unique. It's the flavor profile is very different from like Kokoichi or Gogo Curry,
which is good curry in its own right.
Which are both wonderful, but it just shows you the diversity of types of curry and how they can make it taste and what they can do with it.
Did you write about this one in Japanese GQ?
No, not this one.
Okay.
Not this one.
You've written about curry in Japanese GQ magazine.
Yes, since I've been on the show, I am now a GQ model because there was a photograph of me eating curry in GQ Japan.
Chris Kohler, living the dream.
I'm living somebody's dream.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for listening to Nintendo Voice Shout. We're a weekly show on IGN. As Chris said, you can find him on Twitter at Kobunheat. You can find Jared at
Petty, Jared.
And you can find myself, Jose_Otero. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with more Nintendo Voice Shout.